Hey, we're checking in with Chip Zdarsky, who will be doing a signing in our store on May 20th, Saturday from noon to 3. How are you doing, Chip?
Doing good. I'm excited to come and celebrate the home of my birth, Edmonton.
Ooh, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
you are originally from here-ish.
it's true. It's true. Yeah, I lived in Stony Plain until I was about 6. My dad built a house out there, and then we fled for no reasons that had to do with Alberta.
Oh, we're under no illusions of what Alberta is. Um, as much as I've essentially lived here my entire life, I have a interesting relationship with the province.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think no matter where you live in Canada, everyone
Mhm.
has an interesting relationship with their province.
uh, well, terrible segue. Speaking of interesting relationships, let's talk about
Mm.
public domain.
Oh, good job.
Um, I just did a reread of it the other day, and uh, I am very, very happy that this is a thing that exists. That the energy that you're choosing to put out into the world. That you've chosen a project like this that not only focuses on the comics industry, but maybe sort of the parts of the comics industry that made that comics will eat you alive quote a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh God, comics. We love them. We hate them.
Mhm.
They're such a part of our lives.
Yeah, they help both of us eat, so that's
This
nice.
is true. This is true. Like, I mean, part of what I was trying to do in public domain is like not just be down on the comics. Like, there's a genuine joy in making them, and the people you get to work with, and the reactions from readers, things like that. Like, there's so many good parts to comics that the public domain's about a family where the father, the patriarch, created this character called the Domain back in like the 70s, which is now like the big pop culture character in the world, the movies, the action figures, and much like real life, he doesn't see a dime from it.
Mhm.
But he's rather content. But it's his son who's not, because he sees a world full of the broken promises and the lost revenue and the lack of kind of creator rights. So the story is kind of about the family dynamics and about ownership and about the comic industry and beyond the comic industry now that it's everything. Like, you look at Marvel, it's like
Mhm.
I can't turn around. There's a podcast, there's a movie, there's a TV show. It's all of it. There's there's stage productions. Um, but yeah, but still, it's like there's a love of comics. Like, we're in this because we enjoy the process, we enjoy the people, and yeah. So I hope that part comes across in it for sure.
Without spoiling anything too much, I did really like how sort of the more realistic look at the business end of comics mixed well with the joy of creation, basically, because a big part of that book and in the first arc is about connection in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
and the way that the patriarch has connected or disconnected from his creations and his family,
Mhm.
and how that really comes together at the end.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many stories of like not even older creators now who just like work ridiculous hours and maybe as a result don't have kind of a deep connection to their loved ones because they spent so many hours at the drawing table, kind
Mhm.
of getting these books out into the world. Um, yeah, yeah, and you really notice it. Like, I've been lucky enough to go to the Eisners a few times. And usually, when an older comic creator wins something, they thank it's usually a dude, and they usually thank their wife for keeping everything going at home while they spent all their time on this thing. I'm just like, oh man, like, you're really missing out. Like,
Mhm.
it's nice to be able to draw Captain America or whatever, but it's also nice to cook a meal for your family.
Yeah, exactly. It's a balance that Danica and I have been had to strike with the store.
Oh yeah.
So she's my business partner and my wife, and so even at the start too, it was finding that balance of where things stop in
Hmm.
one place and another, or when they have to continue, or even just when we had to explain to friends. The healthy thing for us is finding periods of time to be apart,
Hmm.
um, mostly because we have to uh, have different inputs so that we can actually talk about them. So we're not just like, oh, this thing happened to me today, and you were there. So
And to you, it happened to you as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
good times.
Yeah, there's kind of an intensity between, because they're very similar ideas, being a lifelong freelancer and a
Mhm.
small business owner. It's like the amount of time you put into it is the amount of like financial reward that you get out of it. So like if you take a vacation, you just don't make money.
Yeah.
When I take a vacation, I don't make my mortgage. Like it's like, yeah, yeah, which kind of feeds the going all in on the work side of things, and maybe kind of getting blinders to other things falling apart in your life, um, which is, clearly is what's happened to the characters in Public Domain.
It's an incredibly relatable story, and
Sadly.
yeah, one that I think is very important too, especially for folks who do engage with the medium. Um, it's it's equally just a story about family,
Mhm.
but also just sort of about the industry that we function in and that we love, and like you said, those relationships and how they push and pull against each other, and yeah, finding that balance like you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And yet the irony is I spend all my time making it, so I don't have the balance.
I can I understand completely.
Yeah.
Recently, I've gotten back into writing, and I started doing more comics industry articles.
Mm.
Um, and our employee, very politely, because I had hit a bit of a funk for the last like year and a half, and a lot of things happened, including us taking on another store's clientele after it burned down,
Oh,
unfortunately.
Jesus. Yeah.
So that's where we have our employee from. We we rescued Andrew. He's a rescue. Um, and he'd kind of seen how I was down, and when I was just like, yeah, you know what, I think I'm gonna start writing about the industry again. He just kind of looks at me and goes, "Are are you sure you want to?
Don't you want to write about puppies
Is
maybe
it
or something?
is it gonna actually be helpful for you?"
Yeah, yeah.
But it's how I get a lot of my frustrations about the industry out, basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
is to get it down and to I don't know, release it from my brain, because otherwise my brain's going like, and another thing.
Yeah. Gotta be careful. You're gonna turn into Canada's Brian Hibbs. That's a cut for for the real comic heads out there.
He actually, when CBR shut down, he called the store to ask my permission if it was okay for Heidi to also be running his columns, which was weird. um, but I almost answered with, "What do you want?" Because it was the area code that Yelp calls from.
Okay, gotcha.
Like that
he
would have
would
been
have he would have
great.
responded fine to that too.
Yeah. So that's public domain. Let's move on to Spider-Man Life Story. This is essentially kind of a bonus collection. So the trade paperback had come out a while ago with the original 6-issue miniseries,
Mhm.
and it's a wonderful interpretation of Spider-Man stories that both ages Peter Parker in real time and still manages to reference sort of real world happenings with what was happening in the comics during those eras. This collection also collects a parallel story with J. Jonah Jameson at the time as well. Um, for this story, I'd listened to some interviews where you talked about having essentially read or reread the entire run of Amazing Spider-Man to prepare.
Yeah. Like a moron. I mean, I can't complain. It's my job is to read Spider-Man comics.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, I don't think I have OCD necessarily, but there's definitely a part of my brain. There's like an itch. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have this thing too. Like, when you're typing a thing, you're just getting something out, but you get the red underline, and you can see there's a spelling error. Like, I have to get rid of that red underline.
Yeah.
Like I have to, or I can't move on. It was similar with that project where I was like, oh, if I miss an issue, like, what if I miss something important? What if there's like a small thing or an event in there that triggers a whole new storyline in my head? Like, yeah, I put a lot on myself there. Luckily, I'm not compulsive enough that I went and read like all of Spectacular Spider-Man and Web of
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man and like Spider-Man and Untold Stories. Like, I could be still working on that book right now if I'd done that. But I felt
There
like
was a healthy due diligence, basically.
yeah, I felt like as long as I made sure I had the main title kind of locked
Mm-hmm.
in my head, I could pull this off without people being upset at me.
And having honestly sold Spider-Man comics since around Civil War, not the Civil War, but
Yeah,
um,
our Civil War.
yeah, um, it's it's all you really need is Amazing as that spine in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
yeah,
That's where the main happenings are, and of course you experience that while you're writing Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man. Like there's the title that's kind of driving usually, and then
yeah.
there's sort of I don't want to say support, but sort of
Oh yeah, it's definitely support. Or you're kind of like, in racing, you're like the one just behind the pole position car, like getting in their stream a little bit, like
right.
they're helping you kind of move along. Um, yeah, and I've been in that position a few times of being kind of the secondary writer, and there's some freedom there
Mhm.
because um, you don't get the anger of the readers as much because you're
Yeah.
making the big moves in the main title, and the big moves are the things that upset people. Whereas I could just reflect the big moves
Mhm.
and just kind of have my kind of fun stories and and bask a little bit in that. Like I think maybe I can't speak for his experience, but like working on Batman, like Rom V is the writer on Detective, and I'm hoping
Mhm.
he kind of has that kind of feeling too. Like he can do these kind of like he's doing these beautiful like kind of gothic lyrical kind of stories because it's kind of a freedom there to just do that while I'm off doing things like, oh, Batman explodes, or oh, I killed a Robin. There's something nice about being in that position, I think.
Yeah, it kind of allows you to have quieter moments, I feel
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
because you're not given the keys to, like you said with Batman, um, you're essentially driving the line.
Yes. There's. I mean, theoretically, there's a lot of pressure on me if I took any of it really seriously, which I probably should.
But going back a little bit to the Spider-Man collection,
Hmm.
I really enjoyed it. It's one of the few books that I let jump the queue. So basically, on Tuesdays, we take all of our stuff home, and this is going to be airing on these streaming shows. We take everything home. We talk about all the new number ones as best we can to help people better know what's coming out, and
Yeah.
we read all of them, all the number ones basically. And like you said, oh no, I have to read all of Amazing Spider-Man for my job.
Yeah.
Um, there there is that work element to it where in my head too, if I don't know this, someone comes in and asks me about this book, I could have connected them with their next favorite story.
Yeah, for sure. You got to know
Um,
your product. I mean, any business does.
yeah. So, but because of that, you know, there's many of the books that I'm the most fond of end up like 5, 6 issues before I can get to them.
Yeah.
Um, this one kind of pushed past my block of like, well, I need to get these number ones done, to like, okay, this is what I'm reading now because I need to know.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
yeah, and I I'm gonna put that in a lot of people's hands when you're here. I've been putting it
Awesome.
into a lot of people's hands. So
That's great. One of the nice things about it, because I was worried working on it that I'm just doing this for like kind of the hardcore fans who know all these bits and pieces of Spider-Man's history. But there have been a lot of kind of like, especially feedback through retailers about their customers where it's their first Spider-Man book
mhm.
and they're reading it and it's like super intense because so many things happen in it. But they're also just like, who's this Craven guy? Like, what's this story based on? And so then the retailer can go and go, oh, here's a Craven's Last Hunt, and now you can actually read a good story about Craven. But like it I like that it kind of piques people's interest in the Spider-Man stories I'm referencing to see what actually happened, because you get like a totally different payoff with each of those kind of like clone saga or whatever.
Mhm.
Though I don't necessarily recommend people go read 5,000 issues of the Clone Saga. That was the hardest one, doing the Amazing Spider-Man read, because it bounces around so much because it crosses over with everything.
Yep.
So I actually had to start reading like Spectacular or Web of or Spider-Man because like it was just one giant 100 issue story, and I got real fractured.
Oh yeah. I don't own very many omnibuses, but the Clone Saga was the period of time that I got into comics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was my mom, and she still works at this pharmacy. My mom wouldn't get off work until 5 p.m. We're done school at 3:30, so you walk to the pharmacy and you be quiet. And part of being quiet was these comics
Yeah.
that were on the racks. So grab some comics, go back. Couldn't understand like one of what was happening. It was like right around the return of Superman and
Okay.
the Clone Saga, and I'm getting just jumbled information of everything. And my cousin collected Spider-Man, and he would never let me read those books. And so the Clone Saga became this like weird grail thing, just like, oh, one day.
The Forbidden Spider-Man.
Yeah. And then the Sensational Spider-Man Zero came out with like a lenticular thing. And I'm like
Mm.
9, 10, just being like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I need to own this.
Yeah.
And so I do now in giant omnibuses. And yeah, when they start off and Peter's like, I'm no longer Peter Parker, I'm only the spider. And in my head, I'm just like, wow, no.
If you were a kid reading it, though, you would have been, "Wow, yes, this is really cool."
Oh, 100%.
Like, there's definitely parts of that that stand up, and then the problem is the profitability of it. So they just kept it going to the point where I think by the end of it, nobody on the books were there at the beginning of the Clone
Mhm.
Saga. That was the hardest one to actually get approved for Life Story, because Tom Brevoort, the editor on it, he was there when the Clone Saga was happening. He's like
Mhm.
Marvel's longtime editor. It was one of his first kind of like entry level jobs, was like assisting on those books, I think. And so it was basically, he had like PTSD from it. He's like, no, no, no clowns. I'm just
No,
like, you
no
just gotta
clones.
trust me. I'm not gonna put in 1,000. Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna focus on like the clones, the two. And he's like, okay. Reluctantly, he allowed me to do it. And then, hopefully he liked what I did.
From the sounds of it, he did. He's put out enough, and he's done a few interviews here and there where he doesn't say anything bad about it. And like
A lot of times, that's
Tom's
all you can
correct.
hope for. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's we there are a few writers that I'm on like text threads with, who have worked for or work for Tom, and whenever you get like just the slightest hint of a compliment from them,
Yeah.
like this reads good, we call them compliments, because they jump to the top of the pile in your head, because a lot of editors will just be like, this is great, exciting, awesome, let's move on, blah blah blah. Like, they're kind of over enthusiastic because they've been trained to be that.
Yeah.
Every page of art that's sent in is the best, every script is the best, even if they have 90 notes. Whereas Tom is just like, okay, if he doesn't give you like, if he doesn't say anything,
Mhm.
then you know it's okay.
Yeah.
That means he's passed it along to the artist, and you're good. If he has notes, then it's not good. But if he says like reads well, you're just like, this is the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Well, that's fun to know.
Yeah. But I appreciate it because it means
Yeah,
so much more when the compliment comes in. He's my favorite editor. I don't think any other editors will mind me even saying that. Like he's got the best story ideas. Working on Life Story with him was like a career highlight. Like I've loved Tom from afar, and I love him going into like a lot of our meetings and stuff. And I've worked with him on a few books, but on that one, like he gives such great story notes that it was like him and I were trying to solve a puzzle. I kind of showed him the timeline of things, and he would give suggestions, and I'd take him or I wouldn't. And he's really good with that as well. Yeah, he's fantastic, responsive. He's great. If you ever get a chance to interview him, thumbs up.
that would
He's awesome.
that would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
He definitely seems like an editor who like, and there's always probably a little bit of ego involved, but is not really driven by any of that. It is very much story and function.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he cares about the story. He cares about the characters. Sometimes he cares about the characters too much.
Mhm.
Like he can really get in. Like, no, this will ruin this character. But like he feels ownership over them. Like he's the guy who's in charge, really. So that makes sense.
Well, and in the newsletter that he just put out, and I know he's talked about it before, but he went over again how Brubaker had to convince him about
Yeah.
Bucky. And I find that to be a healthy amount of engagement where um if you're breaking these things, give me a good reason and I'll be along with you. I might not agree
Mhm.
with the idea itself, but if
Yeah.
you can solve these problems that they might create down the line, then I can't see why this can't be told.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he's so good for that. I've had many stories. I think when I first started writing for him, it was on Marvel 2-in-1. And the initial notes he gave back to me, I was just like, I bounced off of them. I was just like, I don't know how I'm gonna, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this book.
Mhm.
I remember talking to a writer who'd worked with him before, and the writer was just like, no, you're dealing with Tom. Those are suggestions. They're not
Mhm.
edicts. Like, I think the writer said he once told me that I write this character in a way that he fundamentally disagrees with, but he supports me in my writing. He'll let me know if he thinks it's off, but
Yeah.
ultimately, it's my book to write, and my name's going to be big on the cover or whatever. And so, yeah, that writer kind of told me that. I was like, I relaxed a bit, and then I kind of realized, oh no, Tom's having a conversation. I was so used to editors being like, no, you have to change this, you have to do that, you have to do this. But I was like, oh, okay, these are fights I have to have.
Mhm.
Whereas Tom, it's just like, I think you should do this. I think this undercuts your story, and you can fight back on it, or you could take it and roll with it. So Life Story is just like, I think Spider-Man is Tom's favorite character. He's never edited Amazing Spider-Man, weirdly, um, and I think it was his opportunity as well to kind of dig in and kind of fall in love with the character again. And yeah, super special uh, project.
It's honestly, it shows on each and every one of those pages, all the work that you folks did on it.
And Bagley.
Right?
Oh my God! Like Bagley was a late addition to it too, because I think I'd written a couple of issues when we didn't know who the artist was going to be,
Mhm.
and there was some concern because it was like, we wanted it to be a big book, um, but they were also each 30 pages long, and they wanted to solicit it right away. So I was just like, oh, like well, I don't want to fill in on a miniseries by
Yeah, what
issue
kind of
3.
machine is gonna get that done?
Yeah, yeah. So they tapped Bagley for it, and I was like stunned because it's Bagley. Because I just finished reading Amazing Spider-Man. I read his issues of that.
Mhm.
I read all of Ultimate Spider-Man. Like yeah, he's the guy, and so that was exciting getting him on board. But then it was also terrifying because he came in and he was like, "Oh, hey, I'm coming in a little bit late on this project, so I'm gonna try and work a little bit faster." I'm like, "Faster? Like Bagley's fast." So all of a sudden, we were getting like 2 pages a day. We'd
Oh,
pencil
wow.
2 pages a day, and like I remember just like actually having actual nightmares when I was sleeping of him catching up to me. And so like I was just always writing, trying to get that project nailed down just to keep up with him.
There was
He's
that run of Ultimate Spider-Man where he was doing like 18 to 20 issues a year.
Yeah, yeah, it's nuts. And he's not half-assing it. Like those pages are like when we would get them, like they are full pencils. Like he's not leaving a lot to the imagination or for the inker to kind of figure out or color.
Mhm.
It's like no, he's putting in all the work. I was just going through, we get the I get PDFs from Marvel. And I was reading like an issue of like him and Slott doing their Spider-Verse
Mhm.
Spider-Man comic. And I remember I was just looking at it this morning, just like there are so many characters on this page. Like he's still just like, even after all these years, he's been doing this for what, 30 years or whatever. Like he's just like he hasn't slowed down and he hasn't cut corners at all. That's wild. Him and Ramita Jr. are just like unstoppable.
Oh, 100%. It's
Yeah.
it's been really cool uh to to be digging through the Spider-Verse stuff too that he's doing now, cuz like yeah, like you said, there's a lot happening in that book.
Yeah. Yeah. Him and Dan are just kind of throwing it all at the wall, which is fun, And yeah, I like Dan writing Spider-Man. It's nice to see him doing it again, and I like that it's such a different flavor from the main title, from what Zeb Wells and Ramita Jr. are doing. I don't know.